Hello, and thank you for taking the time to listen to this conversation on getting things right first time in relation to your business finance. Whether you're applying for the Coronavirus Business Interruption Loan Scheme or any other business funding, you need to tell a compelling and authentic story about your business and ultimately present a robust business case. The colleagues I'm joined by today will be discussing what you need to consider to get this right first time. My name is Lynne Robertson. I'm part of the Santander Breakthrough team, typically delivering non-financial support to businesses. And I'll be aiming to keep the conversation to topic. I'm delighted to be joined today by three guests who will each bring a different perspective to the discussion. We have Mark Northen, Regional Director with Santander covering commercial clients. Laura Stuffins, a Director at BDO LLP and responsible for the BDO Drive team in the north. And Arnold, MD of the Stickleback Fish Co Ltd, a regional supplier of fresh and frozen seafood to businesses across southern England. I'll let you pause to read our full bios if you fancy it, and otherwise we'll head straight into our discussion. So Mark, would you mind maybe just giving us a quick kind of context as to why we've all jumped on this call today before I go into quizzing Ross on his business?
Yeah, thank you, Lynn. Yeah, I mean, from our perspective, I suppose what we're looking to try to do is to share many of the best practices that we've seen take place over the last few weeks as customers have started to present their applications to us. It seems fair and right that we support our customers as much as we can. And from a personal perspective, I just noticed that we were doing so on an individual basis. To each customer and responding to each request, but actually there were many bits of feedback that were just being replicated. So I suppose our aim and our hope here is to try to reach as many customers as possible. We see it as a professional and moral obligation to be supporting as many customers as we can during this time. And many customers will have be approaching funding for the first time, and that can feel quite daunting. So our hope is just to help put their mind at rest and to try to help them navigate through that and to be able to present the best business case the first time. Because if you can do that, and then obviously you're getting to the funds sooner first up, but also it just helps from a trust perspective and authenticity, as we said at the start, of the application. Because if you can present it right first time, then we all feel more comfortable regarding that point.
Thank you. And Ross, I mean, we asked you to join us today because actually you are one of those customers who have gone through that process and who did get it right first time. And I wondered if you could just maybe talk us through some of the steps that you took and your experience of going through that.
Thank you very much, Lynn. I think, as you said in your introduction, we're a regional wholesaler of seafood. We take about £10 million a year, and the company's been running about 15 years. The coronavirus has had an absolutely massive impact on my business, which we felt really from around the 16th of March, when we went to our normal sort of weekly turnover of about $250,000 a week, down by 50% in the first few days and 90% in the following day. So within a week, we'd gone to a 90% reduction in revenue. We're a business where we're 70% focused on hospitality and 25% education, and because of the pandemic, both those sectors were entirely closed, and so that was expected. I think before we got in touch with the bank, we took a lot of our own actions, and I just wanted to sort of perhaps go through 4 or 5 of those actions that we took, because I think it's quite important to show that businesses have got to do everything they can, perhaps before we immediately ask for help. In terms of the first actions we took, obviously I mentioned earlier that we were a business based on selling to wholesale. So I spent the last 10 years, we get odd calls from the public and asking us to provide them with fish, but we were a wholesale only business. But as we said, that business closed down very, very quickly. So we very, very quickly identified the customers that were buying from us, a few care homes, a bit of NHS work we do, and certainly the farm shops, which was in the first stage was a big market and a big opportunity to us. So very, very quickly in the first few days, we developed a better a range of retail items, and we started selling increased lines into those farm shops, which we did about 15 or 20 farm shops at that time. At the same time, we also initiated some selling by van and on private property in our communities, in our pubs and restaurants that we currently serve. We had a fairly big sales team of sort of 12 or 15 people. They didn't have much to do, so we initiated some van sales, and that was very, very successful. However, the social distancing obviously came in very, very quickly. The farm shops closed. Obviously, our ability to sell through vans and through members of the public congregating in areas was not going to work. So we had to think of a different tactic, and that tactic was obvious for me. We obviously needed to sell direct to the public. I suppose we were lucky in some regard. We had a product that we knew there was an appetite to have. I think there's some figures quoted out there that there were a million meals a week eaten in hospitality. Obviously, they weren't going to be eaten. So there was going to be an undoubted pressure on the retail chain, the supermarket business. And so we spent a very short amount of time. To be fair, from start to finish, we spent 72 hours, and I think it was £100 on developing a retail website, and we got that up and running and selling to people in our own geography. Obviously, you can't just have a website and think traffic is going to be directed to that. So that's a lot about social media and getting people to share posts and getting people engaged in that. But we got that up and running very quickly. And really not huge figures, but we were certainly taking £500 to £1,000 a day very, very quickly. And that was entirely needed at that time, and it still is needed, and very much very beneficial to the business. So apart from that revenue side, which was obviously entirely important, but it was obviously clear we weren't going to replicate that revenue that we'd lost. So we embarked on a few other things that we needed to do. So second of all, we looked at our overheads and our costs and what could effectively be trimmed, and what we could do to, I keep talking about, we need to get to a base cost. We need to get to a base revenue and a base cost to understand what the business looks like, to understand where we can build from, and understand where our pressures are going to be, both in terms of profitability, but also in terms of cash flow. So, to be fair, we forensically went through the costs in a business. When you grow like we've grown to sort of 60 or 70 staff, obviously you don't control everything yourself anymore. People have company credit cards. People buy things because they think they're things that we need. But we got a very, very quick grip on that. So without going into too much boring detail, we just really cut that, and it was absolutely the essentials of what we needed. And what we needed to spend. We also went out to people that we had, so non-fish suppliers that we had contracts with. So whether that's the people that look after our van maintenance, our van refrigeration, our insurance company. We had 28 company vehicles. It was clear we didn't need anything like that. So we did a deal with them, and we put 3/4 of the fleet tied up. So we got rebates for that. We've got rebates for refrigeration contracts and suppliers and so forth, just to get to a base cost. Because I thought very, very quickly we need to understand where that was. I think thirdly, and perhaps the largest area that we then looked at, was our staffing. I mean, after the purchase of fish, staffing is our second biggest cost. We had 64 members of staff in early March, and it became very apparent to me very, very quickly in and after the 16th of March that I knew this was going to be far-reaching, this coronavirus. It was going to affect hospitality in a really, really significant way, and I never thought it would. That we'd close down for a month and on the next month we'd rebound. So we made a very, very difficult decision. This was pre the furlough system being set up and being announced. We made a very, very difficult decision to make some colleagues redundant. The company has grown organically for the last 15 years, around about 15 to 20% per year, slightly more at the beginning, slightly less in recent years, but certainly double-digit growth. So we were always ratcheting ourselves up for growth, and so our staffing profile was always ratcheted up to do that. And so we almost had too many staff at any one time. So we looked very, very closely and very, very carefully. And I made a very, very quick decision in mid-March to make 15 colleagues redundant, which was very difficult. And I know that affects every family in every case. We had to do it to preserve the livelihood of the business and the rest of the employees that work for us. Obviously, after that, the furlough scheme was announced. And we moved very, very quickly. We commenced in the 22nd of March to put 34 colleagues onto furlough and get down to a base staffing level, which is about 15, and it stayed for 6 weeks. It's remained 5 or 6 weeks. It's remained at 15, which we're able to operate the business. Not so stretched that if anything happened, we didn't have enough people, but we went into things with a completely different mental view of things, and that's testament to the fantastic people we've got working here. And we went in very much with the idea that, although we had set things to do and set areas of specialism, that we'd all do everything. We wouldn't, we didn't have the cleaner anymore, so we'd all help out with the cleaning. And some days we're going to be busier than other days, so we need an extra van driver, and we did an extra person to do this. So we went in with a very, very simplistic approach, but I think it was a good approach, and I think it worked. The fourth area that we went through was, obviously, we're dealing with mostly fresh and frozen, or exclusively fresh and frozen fish, but we were dealing with a fresh, high-value, short-life product, which was a serious concern for us. I typically buy fish between 10 and 20 days before it gets delivered. So although we had no business or very little business, we commenced in the 16th, we commenced in the 23rd, we still had fish coming in, and it was coming in, by the truckload. And so we had to move very, very quickly and very, very carefully into manipulating that product into a saleable frozen product. Literally, I think I think the figure was we froze about £250,000 worth of fish during that period at cost. And we were very, very careful to freeze that in a very marketable way. So, instead of, you typically sell a box of bass or bream or haddock in a 10 kilo box of the halter, but I knew that might not be there. So we broke things down and packed them into packs of 2 fillets and 4 fillets, because I thought the retail side would be a marketable side for us. So we spent a lot of time during those weeks, those couple of weeks, getting the product back into a saleable commodity and having value in our inventory, rather than having a lot of waste, which could have easily been. I think the fifth area that we looked at was the ledger, the sales ledger, the customers that owe us money. We are the first stage typically in the chain that offer credit. So, the restaurants, the pubs we operate, that we sell to, typically you go obviously into somewhere to eat, and you pay for your lunch or dinner at the till that evening, at lunchtime. Typically we offer 45 days credit to our customers. So at any one time we have just over £1 million outstanding, and that was a concern to me, because we were operating in a sector where is high risk in any time in any world. But the sector was shut, So that was a big concern. So we went in with a couple of attacks. We put a lot of effort into collecting money. Those customers that were supporting us, and typically we serve 700 different customers in a month, and we've tracked down to about less than 100 at the moment. So those guys that were serving us, we worked with them, and we asked them if you have got some business, the care homes and so forth, if we can try and pay a little bit quicker to perhaps ease a little bit of cash flow. But also with our other customers, we just proactively contacted those customers just to try and get some ledger payments in, because I've got experiences of a couple of different businesses in a couple of different sectors, and I know as much as profitability, cash flow is the life and blood of any business, and so important. So we've put a huge amount of effort into that. And just to give you a sense, I looked at it before the meeting today, and we've moved our ledger down from over £1 million in early March to under 400,000 today. And that's testament to a real focus on that area, and my team working really, really hard to collect payments. So I think that's quite a quick summary of the sort of the things that we've done and the processes that we've perhaps we've been through in the last 6 weeks.
Ross, thank you for your honesty, because not every business would go into as much detail in terms of the challenges you faced and the steps that you've taken. And actually those 5 steps, if we turn them into a nice flow chart, I think that's going to help an enormous number of businesses. So thank you for your honesty. Laura, I'm just wondering from your perspective in terms of what you see coming through BDO, is that typical? I mean, is that level of detail and that forensic approach, to use Ross's words, is that what you're typically seeing in terms of businesses trying to present their business in the current climate?
I think it's fair to say that lots of businesses are making lots of decisions in a much quicker environment than they're used to, and having to make decisions that fundamentally change potentially their business model overnight. So, I suppose similar to what Ross just outlined. I think, good businesses have a good handle on this sort of thing and know where to go and where to sort of focus efforts in terms of cash, getting cash into the business. As Ross said, cash is king, and that's the most important focus for a lot of businesses. And it is important to take all of those measures. I think what we are seeing is some businesses may not have as much sort of readily available information to be able to make those decisions. And to make them quick enough to respond to the situation, and that is holding some businesses back, which as we will come on to, is really important when you're thinking about making those next stages in terms of funding and financing going forward.
Thank you, Mark. I mean, I know from your perspective, as you mentioned earlier, the whole point of doing this is to try and get more people thinking along the lines of Ross. So, in the applications that you've seen come through, and touching on what Ross has spoken about, what are you seeing as making that kind of great application? What are the ones that are coming in that you're looking at going, yeah, we've got no questions about this, we can just, go straight ahead and submit?
Yeah, in many respects, we can use Ross's example as the template of what good looks like, because what stood out to me and to the bank as a whole, really, when we reviewed that, was just the logic and the common theme and thread that came through on the presentation. So what Ross has been able to talk through there in chronological order, talk through, right, this is what I did in this week, that week, I've taken advantage of all the schemes that are available. I think it's something that is important for everyone to consider, is that actually borrowing in some respects should be the last resort, because there is a cost associated with it. The scheme isn't a grant, and as I've spent to a number of customers, that actually, what you've got to consider is this is a loan that, yes, up to 6 years you'll be repaying, but in essence, in taking on some of the borrowing that you are taking, that your business will be saddled with that for that period of time. And that could mean that over that period of time, effectively, you're treading water, because the cost of servicing that loan subsequently will be such that your historic profitability will be removed. Which I suppose comes on to another point, and that is just being able to present the case which is realistic. And I think that's, again, something that Ross's application was able to do. So alongside reviewing everything that he'd done and being able to present the levers that he'd pulled already, the levers that he was going to be able to put in the future as well. And that's an important point, because I think at the moment no one can be 100% clear as to how long this will continue. We were also able to be able to pull through in greater detail the reality of the level of debt. So what Ross wasn't doing was just picking a figure. Wasn't just saying, okay, look, here's a number that I'm going to need. There was a clear rationale to that, and there's a clear appreciation. I think this is an important part of the scheme, is to be able to prove that serviceability of that loan pre-COVID. And you can see that Ross considered that in his considerations. So had an understanding of what the business might look like. Yes, we can't be 100% sure. And I know there's a lot of discussions about the value of the cash flow forecasts and so forth. But I think you've got to be able to scenario plan to be able to consider what the outcomes might be. And in those people that are able to do that, as I said, it all just helps in terms of the strength of the application, to be able to see that someone's thought that through. We've had a number of applications that have also come in when someone's pitched for a number. It seems to be plucked in some respects. You know, we'll go for 500,000. We've then had discussions with the customer and they've said, okay, well, let's go for 250. And you seem to be like we're in a horse trade as to what the depth figure should be, when actually what we're asking for, and back to the point of this presentation today, is for it to be right first time. So present a case to us which is based on what you feel you need, and that behind that is a clear set of assumptions which we can all buy into as being realistic. If you've got that thread to it, you know, going back to the point you've made, taken actions, these are the actions you could take, this is where you find yourself in, and there's clear disruption associated with it, then, you know, in all honesty, the applications will sell through and the money will flow much like we all want it to do. But, you know, we do have, as custodians of the scheme, an obligation to make sure that we're supporting businesses in the right way, and we're entrusted to do that. And you know, as a bank, you know, that is our wants and our wishes, basically, to be a responsible lender, and to be doing so once we've been able to support customers in going through the rigour which we feel is warranted. As I say, having done that, and as I say, I wish in some respects we could present Ross's application, which, as I say, came with a list of a 2-page kind of summary of what he's done and what he's going to do and the assumptions. Then, you know, it sails through. I think within 24 hours, no comments added at all from our side, really. We're able to agree alone and to be able to move it forward, which was wonderful to see and be able to do, and obviously why we've asked Ross to be here today.
Just to add to that, Mark, I think it's, you know, it's important, isn't it, to say, yes, you know, there's a lot of panic out there, and there are immediate cash flow requirements for business. Obviously there are, but it's thinking through actually not just the short term, but the medium term. So, you know, what's going to happen in your business as, you know, things start to develop over the next few months. Yes, we don't quite know what that's going to look like, but you've made decisions within your business now that will, you know, there will be sort of the medium term to think about, in terms of, it might be a new area of the business that you've just moved into. So, you know, in Ross's example, you know, moving to selling to the public, that's probably a new area of business for you that, you know, in 5, 6, 7, 8 months time, what are the sorts of questions you need to be thinking about, what are the sorts of issues you need to be thinking about in the medium term. And then obviously there's the long-term position, as you say, Mark, you know, it's debt that's, you know, needs to be repaid over a number of years. What will be those plans over the number of years? And presenting a case where that has been thought through not only shows you the viability in terms of the numbers, but the quality of the management and the ownership of the company to be able to repay the loan. And a lot of what actually goes into, you know, your decisions is not just numbers, but does the management of this company have the ability, the knowledge, and, you know, the innovation in some respects to, you know, to be able to service loan and pay it back and actually steer this business in the right direction going forwards. So there's more of a side to it, if you like.
I agree. I think that you know, is that demonstration of that entrepreneurial spirit, which is effectively what Russ has done here. I know we're now talking on his behalf, but you know, that came through. You know, he didn't need to write down, by the way, I'm a great manager. You know, that came through in the presentation. So, you know, we knew that, and therefore, as I said, it's a much easier consideration to be able to go through. And because it included that is the reason why the application was so swift. So yeah, it's those impressions count, and it comes back to that point about being right first time. Be realistic, be clear as to how you arrived at your assumptions, and then suddenly the whole thing kind of holds together with some seriously strong cement, and makes you know, decision making far more simple. I know we're going to go on to it as well, Lynn, but I think the important point here is to not be overawed by the thought about the complexity of what you're presenting. I know there's been a lot of discussions in the press regarding cash flow forecasts, but you know, the reality is, in some respects, you're missing out the difficult part of the P&L and balance sheet. And I know Ross has got a view on this as well, but just in terms of being able to pull together a cash flow forecast, you know, it's not as complex and daunting as perhaps it might sound.
No, I think it was one of the things I was interested to pick up both with Ross and Laura. Ross, you know, you've approached this, I'm assuming actually just you've taken this on and you've pulled your forecast together. And we know that we're seeing a lot of businesses who are maybe not able to get the level of support that they've had previously from accountants, for example. Laura, I'm just wondering, what can a business owner do who's maybe not as comfortable with this kind of thing as Ross clearly has been, in terms of pulling that, credible, clear, logical cash flow together? How do they approach that if it's not something they're used to doing?
Yeah, and management information in a business is just so important. You can't stress that enough. And I think a few people's eyes have been opened to just how important that is at the moment, and understanding their financials. Cash flow is it's not as hard as I think people think it is. I mean, just looking at the incomings and outgoings of the business and thinking about the timings of those is the pinnacle of it. Thinking about actually, have you been, what is your working payment cycle? Have you maybe not been chasing debts as much as you should have been? Could you get things in sooner than you could have before? Have you talked to your suppliers in terms of, payment dates on that? Do you really understand what the working capital cycle of your business is, which is when you are receiving money and paying money? And just the timing of all of that. So it's breaking it down just to a very practical level to show to the bank that what all the incomings are, what all the outgoings are, when they're going to happen, what things can be flexed, what things can't be, and also that you've looked into all the measures that are available to businesses in terms of things like VAT deferments, and you've looked through all those possibilities, and that is built into the cash flow that you're presenting. And almost just working through on that cash basis in terms of what's coming into the bank and what's going out, when you think that's going to be, and just try and keep it as simple as possible but robust, I think, is my advice.
And Ross, is the whole forecasting thing something that you do on an ongoing basis anyway? I'm just curious actually as to what your approach is to this.
So I think that's an interesting point. So I've always, a couple of points that Laura and Mark made. I mean, information is key. So for 15 years, we've produced management accounts. So when we were taking £10,000 a week, £500,000 a week, we've always produced management accounts, because profitability is really, really important to me, and it's an important tool to have. To be absolutely honest, we have not produced a cash flow forecast for 10 years or so. And so it was a challenge for me, and I did a lot of this myself. I've got a team around me, but I did a lot of this myself, and I certainly directed it. We haven't needed to particularly done a cash flow because we weren't tight on cash. I hadn't taken a lot of cash out of the business, excessive amounts of cash. That's why we didn't do a cash flow forecast. But I've always had the management account information. So I think in some ways the cash flow forecast was a little bit daunting for me. But just as Mark said, and just as Laura said, I think a cash flow forecast really, in its simplest format, is your bank balance. Yes, it's what your bank balance looks like today. So it's as simple as not what your sales are, but when that revenue comes in. So if you're a restaurant or a takeaway or a shop, that payment, that income coming in fairly quickly, maybe 3 days on the credit card processing, but certainly within a couple of days. For a business like ours, it's a completely different profile. It's much longer, and it's 45 days. So it's when that cash comes in and what you can do about bringing that cash in quicker. As Laura just mentioned, we worked a lot with customers that we were serving to try and shorten that payment cycle. And it's about your outgoings, both what don't you need to pay now, what isn't, what you don't, we're a big electricity user. We spend about £1,200, about £1,200 a week on electricity, about 60,000 a year on electricity. We negotiated with our utility company to pay a standing charge. It's £20 a month. Yes, they're very happy with that. So that's what went in the cash flow, not £1,200 a week, but £20 a month. So it's about those outgoings when they go out and when they need to go out. I think what I didn't talk about, perhaps a little bit on the key, the points I went through earlier, is we did a lot of negotiation with our suppliers. And we were very, very, very quickly, in mid-March, I was very upfront with them. I said, we're going to have a problem. we've got to have a problem. I get a lot of quite a lot of emails from suppliers weekly, and I answer them all. I don't ignore phone calls. I deal with them because I understand their pain. And it's really, I coined a phrase fairly early on, it's just about sharing the pain. You know, I've got guys on furlough or on 80% of their pay, they're in pain. We've got a business which is at 85% or 15% of its revenue, 85% a reduction. It's really, we're, as business owners, we're feeling the pain. So we all need to feel the pain a bit. So lengthening those purchase ledger, some of those payments with communication is a very key point. So really, I wasn't doing a cash flow. Cash flow wasn't a thing that I've done recently, and it wasn't a natural thing for me. But it wasn't too difficult if you stick with some of those principles. And perhaps echoing what Mark talked about, it was the cash flow which directed us to what funding we needed. Yes, we did everything we could do to cut costs, to defer payments, to get money in quicker, to put staff on furlough, lots and lots of things. But the cash flow directed us to the amount of funding that we were missing. And for us, that wasn't, you know, in April, it wasn't within a few weeks. So perhaps we were lucky. I don't know. But we had some serious pressures in June and over June, July, and August over the summer, and that showed us funding gap that we needed, and that was the basis of our application to the bank.
Lynne, can I just jump in there, because I think it's an important thing to consider is just the accuracy and the credibility of the presentation, because we spoke quite a bit there about just the flow of funds as per the current account, and obviously as a bank we have the visibility on that, and I think that's the important part for me, and to Ross's point about sharing of that pain. So, you know, what he's saying is this is what we've done. So words and figures start to hold together. So again, I'll talk to that point about authenticity, which we mentioned at the start. So, you know, we've been able to say these are the actions we've taken, and as a demonstration of that, this is what it looks like in our cash flow. And obviously, from our perspective, it's an easy read across. You know, we then look back at the account to say, okay, in the past, this was what the electricity costs were. So great work. You know, you've negotiated. This is what it looks like now. This was the staff cost and the wages cost beforehand. This is what it looks like now. So again, you know, we're doing the check and balance on this to make sure that, you know, as a responsible lender, as I said, we're able to make a decision which holds up under scrutiny. And it makes the role very easy. So I think that kind of that credibility point is important to emphasise, and the reality that it must stack up against what has been going through the current account pre-COVID. Remembering that is one of the eligibility tests for us to consider is that they are able to business is able to support that funding on that basis. So yeah, again, another reason as to why in the case for Ross here, we were able to move the case forward with such speed and accuracy. So.
And Ross, I wanted to just pick up on the point Mark made earlier about serviceability and the fact that, you know, your decision to apply for funding was very much driven by your cash flow. Just for anyone who's listening who might be borrowing for the first time, and I'm sure there will be many businesses in that position, what would you say from a business owner's perspective in terms of making sure that you're honest and realistic about the figure that you're looking for? Because there are implications on the business, obviously.
Well, I think perhaps the biggest point is that the fact that it is borrowing, it is a loan, yes, it's not a grant, yes, and so to take on debt, as Mark mentioned a few minutes ago, that may wipe out your profitability in years to come. So I think it's being very honest about what you can defer. There are some grants available. We're not particularly, or we're not in a sector which qualifies for those grants. So it's being very, very careful to probably research what is available. But it is debt and it needs servicing, and that will have a significant and maybe a huge impact on profitability in subsequent years. You know, I've worked for 50, you know, I set up this business 15 years ago. It's, as every business owner knows, it's a lot. It's running your own business is a huge amount of work. You put a lot of effort into it, and to see my future earnings significantly affected is a huge factor. But that's life, you know. I think to think the coronavirus is something that we're a victim of is not the case. We've got to, you know, I want to continue to run my business in the future, so we took on the right level of debt, what I thought was the right level of debt, so we can service that debt, but also that we can ensure some profitability in the future.
Thanks, Ross. And I think you did mention earlier the whole, you know, you're still in this business to grow it. And I think it's a really positive message that we're in difficult times at the moment, but actually we will come out of this and there is potential to grow what we're doing. So again, thank you for your honesty. I think we could probably keep talking for another half hour on these topics, but we did say we would try and keep it as easily accessible as possible for our audience. I think maybe just before we wrap up, is there one kind of additional key takeaway that you'd like to share with people listening? Maybe Laura, if we start with you.
I think it's being honest, realistic, understanding the ins and outs of your business, and don't overstretch yourselves.
Brilliant. Mark?
I don't have a lot to that, really. I think Laura summed that up perfectly. In the essence of what this presentation was all about. As I said, we spent a bit of time considering what the content would be, and you know, there are the chapter and verse for me as to what it looks like. And I'll come back to the point. One of the points we just said at the start: aim for right first time. Aim for a presentation which has all the factors we've discussed here pulled together into a cohesive presentation, and that will support the case. You know, a scattergun approach to this does not support the model, and you know, that's ultimately how we've been able to get to this point with Ross and with all the other businesses that we've been able to support, because that's the common thread. And whilst we've got there sometimes after a period of time, you know, I'm desperate for businesses to be able to present it right the first time, and for us to help as many of them as we can, as quickly as we can, and hopefully, therefore, that, you know, that there's been you know, there's some help from the content that we've been able to produce today.
Fantastic, thank you. Ross, any final word from you? You've been amazing on this call.
Right.
So
I think the only thing I'd add to that is, for me, it's about making decisions. Yes, and you might fill out your comfort zone. You might be needing to operate in a sector that you haven't operated for in the past, and that's gonna feel difficult. But as business owners, we need to make decisions, and we need to make them fairly quickly and certainly decisively. So that's what my journey's been about. It's about taking those decisions and making them quickly, and, you know, making sure they are 90% right, but making those decisions. So that's the most important thing I would take.
well, fantastic. Thank you so much, everybody. This recording is going to be available on demand, so hopefully people will go back and listen to the things that were pertinent to them. We will also provide a bit of a write-up of some of the key points as well, so businesses can dip in and out of that document as well. And perhaps we'll welcome you back. I've already, like, there's many other topics going around in my head, so maybe we get back together again in a couple of weeks and have another conversation about another aspect of finance. You knew it would be so fascinating. So thank you very much, and yeah, see you soon. Many thanks again to Laura, Mark and Ross for joining us today. If anybody does want any more information on the organisations from today's call, you have the list in front of you. Feel free to click through and go to any of these links. Otherwise, thank you for your time today and hope you can join us again soon.